we could have you on at any time. Could be after a win, could be after a loss, with how things are in the SEC this year with the depth of the conference, which we can get to. Today happens to be after Tennessee lost at Kentucky last night. The Vols had a 3-game winning streak before that and had looked really impressive leading up to last night. So what do you make of all of that? What Tennessee has done to this point, went 0-2 against Kentucky, but where that leaves maybe Tennessee going into the final 3 weeks of regular season play?
Yeah, I guess Kentucky kind of cracked the code on Rick Barnes' defense. The only team this season to shoot 50% from the floor against Tennessee, and they've done it twice, shooting an identical 12 of 24 from three in both games. Yeah, it's surprising, like the holes that you're seeing from time to time in the Tennessee defense. Concerning from the standpoint of they don't have the elite sort of scoring option to always counter that like they did last season when you had Dalton Connect. Because Charles Lanier, for as wonderful of an outside shooter as he is, he's just not quite that dynamic 3-level scorer that DK was. And so, no, it's not fair to boil this entire season down to Dalton Connect versus Chaz Lanier. That's woefully unfair. But if you want a snapshot of where things are and why this team isn't maybe quite as high on the ceiling as last year's, I think that sort of explains it.
How do you compare Tennessee to what you've seen at the top of the league? Alabama, Auburn. Tennessee still has a game against Alabama to go, but we've seen Tennessee against Florida twice, at Auburn, which was close, down the stretch. And then anybody else you want to throw into that conversation among the top teams in the SEC?
Yeah, I got to see Auburn in person last night in Nashville, and they started out on a 15-0 run against Vanderbilt. Like, boy, you don't think Bruce Pearl got after his guys after they took a home loss to Florida? I think he did. Now, to Vanderbilt's credit, they clawed back and actually took the lead in the second half. But Auburn and Alabama, we are headed towards an Iron Bowl on the hardwood of just absolutely massive proportions on Saturday, because it's crazy. Auburn is number one in the AP poll, but Alabama is number one in the coaches poll, and they're going to be playing on Saturday, and the winner will, I think, indisputably be number one in every poll come Monday. So those two are on a tier above the rest of the conference, and Florida is not all that far behind them. They're just a bit more inconsistent. We saw them come into Thompson Food City Center, and take a 20-point loss. So I don't think Alabama or Auburn, even on their worst day, are capable of playing that poorly. And then Tennessee is kind of right there with Florida. But yeah, it's just the offensive consistency is what's holding Tennessee back. And then you run into a team like Kentucky that cracks your code defensively. I don't think that's going to happen a ton, but we've seen it happen enough now to where if I were power ranking the SEC, I think at the moment I'd have Tennessee either 4 or maybe 5 behind Texas A&M, which is a team that's playing really, really well right now.
Tennessee was listed as a 1 seed last week. Do you think Tennessee can still grab that number 1 seed, or do you think last night hurt Tennessee's chances no matter what they do for the rest of the regular season?
No, I think they could still do it, Swain. As of this moment, our Jerry Palm did knock Tennessee down to a 2 and move Florida up to a 1. But you look down the stretch, you do still have Alabama. You get Texas A&M. There are 2 pretty solid quad 1 opportunities there. You take care of business in one of those 2 and win all the rest going into the SEC tournament, you can be back there on that 1 seed line. In that SEC tournament, it's just going to be insane. Even on day 1, you're going to have 3 or 4 bubble teams duking it out, just trying to get into the field of 68. And then as the tournament progresses, the battle for number 1 seeds is going to be high theater. Now, we know the championship game, based on history, actually does not, it appears, have a large impact on what happens with the final seedings, because what was it, a couple of years ago, Tennessee won the SEC tournament, probably should have bumped them up, and it didn't happen, right? So, the impact of that tournament will be limited come Sunday, but Wednesday through Saturday, I think you're going to see a lot of it get sorted out in terms of where these teams fall on the NCAA tournament seed line.
David Cobb, CBSSports.com, is with us. Where do things stand in terms of how many SEC teams you think would be in right now? How many could be in? Maybe how many you think will be in here in, 4 weeks or so?
Well, there's 14 in the mix. I mean, LSU and South Carolina are your only two that are done. I mean, they'd have to do something absolutely miraculous. Now, the other 14 still have a chance, and Arkansas is the one who's crept into that conversation now. The ones you're looking at is kind of teetering on the brink would be Texas and Georgia, along with Arkansas right now. And then we still got to see a little bit more from Oklahoma, which is really kind of struggling right now. But yeah, I would say 12 is probably where it ends up, just because whatever loss you take in this conference, it really doesn't penalize you. So you're going to go into the SEC tournament kind of in the same situation you are now in all likelihood. You're probably going to have 13 or 14 that have a chance. And then, you'll probably lose one along the way. One of these teams is going to lose on the first day in Nashville, and it's going to cost them a spot in the field. I firmly believe that's going to happen. So the bubble is very SEC heavy right now. In a bad scenario, if things went really poorly for the league, I mean, worst case 10, and that's worst case. So even in the worst case scenario, it's still a historically good season.
Over under on the amount of teams from the SEC in the Final Four at 2.
Ooh, I'm actually take the under. I gotta see some more March performance from the league. That's the thing. The pressure is going to be on. If the SEC ends up with 3 number 1 seeds, it's possible the SEC could end up with 4 number 1 seeds, which would be insane. Boy, the pressure's on at that point, right? Because you got to produce if you produce that many highly seeded teams. So, I mean, as we all know, the tournament is so crazy that let's say, of the 68 who make it, probably 30 are legitimately good enough to make a run. If 10 of those 30 or 8 of those 30 are from the SEC, yeah, odds are you get under 2. But as so long as you get 1, you have to get at least 1 in the NCAA tournament, or else you're just going to be the butt of every joke in late March and early April, and people will ignore the fact that it was a historically dominant regular season. That's just the way it is in college basketball. It's all about March.
Yeah, well, SEC did take a lump during football season, so we got to recover in basketball season.
Make up for it in basketball and baseball season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a basketball league now. It's a baseball conference. But no, that's true. I mean, the SEC did not have a fantastic showing in the college football playoff. They've got a chance to make up for it in basketball here. But it's interesting. The other question, the other way to sort of phrase the same concept is when it comes to who's going to win the national championship. Are you taking the SEC or are you taking the field? That's a tough one. Like when you really break it down, if you look and say, hey, there's 10 teams that have the ability to win the national championship this year, you got to think at least 4 or 5 of them are from the SEC. So, it's conference bragging rights are going to be on display in this NCAA tournament, no doubt.
David Cobb, CBS Sports. What interests you the most right now looking outside the SEC? Is it what Duke can do the rest of the way? St. John's has been one of the top stories with that program kind of being back, and then Rick Pitino, of course, leading. They have a game tonight against Villanova, which I think is interesting. But what's standing out to you, that or otherwise, outside the SEC right now?
Well, Duke is legit. They took a loss at Clemson over the weekend, but that's a fun team. Cooper Flagg is the real deal, and they've got the pieces around him to be a threat. So what would be so fascinating if Duke is able to piece this thing together and get to the national title game is the idea that they're doing it relying not exclusively, but very heavily on freshmen, where the last decade it's been shown that's not really the recipe for success anymore. But if John Shire is able to get that done with Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple and a really strong freshman class leading the way, boy, all of a sudden we've turned back the clock to 2013, 2014, Coach K's heyday and Cal's great teams at Kentucky. Because that's not really been the way it's gone in college basketball for most of the last decade. But John Shire has kept a laser-focused approach on that formula, bringing in the high-dollar, big-time 5-star guys, and he's got a shot to make it work and sort of turn back the clock.
Vandy fans really chant overrated at Janai Broome last night?
They did, Josh. I didn't think that was a good idea. They did it. And I think if you go back and look from about the time they did that early in the first half to the end of the game, Auburn outscored Vanderbilt by double digits from that point forward. The crazy thing, though, about it was that, Janai Broome had his classic, 17-8 or whatever he ended up with. but he wasn't even their best player. And that's what's so special about Auburn is like they don't have to force feed Janai Broome and have him be at his best to be a really good team. There are 6th and 7th guys going off for 20 points on that Auburn team, and they're beating a quality SEC opponent on the road by double digits. That's what's scary about Auburn. It's like, sure, Broome's awesome, and when he's on, they're unbeatable, but they're still really good even when he's not.
Yep, Auburn-Bama, the first of 2 matchups this season. This weekend, huge game, 1 versus 1 with the 2 polls this weekend. David, before you go, Tennessee will host Vanderbilt. Vandy beat Tennessee in Nashville. Did you cover that game? Were you there in person? But what do you think about that matchup as they'll play in Knoxville this Saturday, the rematch between Tennessee and Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I was there the first time around, and it came down to free throws, and Chaz Lanier, the Nashville kid, obviously missed one, and that was tough for Tennessee. Huge for Vandy. That one basically put them on the bubble. It legitimized Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's gone on to beat Kentucky and looks like a potential NCAA tournament team. I mean, Mark Byington's done an incredible job there, and I profiled kind of what he's done at CBS Sports yesterday. But you got to think, Rick Barnes, the track record this season has been that after a loss, I mean, you kind of get the best effort from Tennessee. So I think it's a horrible spot for Vandy going into Knoxville with what should be an angry Tennessee team on its home floor. Tennessee is up and down, but still, I mean, absolutely a top 10 caliber team. And so when you look at Vandy, if you're able to contain Jason Edwards, he's kind of their electric little scoring guard, a jitterbug type who can beat most guys off the dribble, then you're in good shape. The first time around, they didn't do that particularly well. But if you can kind of eliminate him and make him uncomfortable with Jemai Meshack or Zakai Ziegler, things break down. And then the other thing, too, which Tennessee typically does a good job of, if you take care of the basketball against Vanderbilt and make them play half-court offense and eliminate their ability to get out in transition, scoring for them can be tough, especially if you're locking down Edwards. So I think Tennessee's got a pretty good shot to get some redemption in that game.